an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Wintersteel, the 8th book in the Cradle series, Prologue and Chapter 1. That's right, kids. That's right. Prologue and Chapter 1, and that's it! I stopped myself, and it was real hard. In these chapters, we get to see exactly what happened to the Sword Sage. And honestly, I'm really surprised at how much I liked this guy, and I should have known because Yaren's got good taste. But I kind of thought he was going to be more like Northstrider, I guess. And he's great, and I'm super bummed that he's dead now. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andrew for commissioning this episode. What's up, Andrew? You out there? Yeah, y'all, this was such a surprise. I never thought... Andy's here. Hi! I never thought that we were going to get to see this. And I have so many questions for Will White. Will, if you're listening, I actually do... There's a series that I'm covering, the Books of the Ancestor, and they are written by Mark Lawrence, and Mark Lawrence listens to every show I do on his books, and then he will tweet at me about it, and it's very uncomfortable in a way to know that the author's listening to me, sometimes rag on him a little bit, but, someday, maybe Will be like, you know what, I would really like to hear somebody just break my books the fuck down. I want to know, did he completely plan this the way that it has gone? Or did he write things in such a way that he began to realize that a sage being beaten by a bunch of jades didn't make sense, and he went back and retroactively changed a bit of the story? And I want to clarify, I have no problem with the overall concept of retconning. If indeed he was kind of like, well, it doesn't really work anymore, does it? I guess I'm going to have to do something about that. Fine. I really don't have a problem with that. But I love the fact that this works out so well that I can't tell. I genuinely, there's a lot of times where it's very obvious when something has been retconned and you're just like, okay, sure. I guess we're just going to pretend that's a thing or was a thing the whole time. But I really, the fact that I couldn't tell either way. If you told me he'd planned it, I'd believe you. If you told me he hadn't, I'd believe you. That's great to me. I really enjoy the fact that I can't tell. Jake says, Will's can something answer is that everything was planned and he always knows everything. Andy says he has said he definitely planned it as a mystery, but he regrets not having characters ask right away, how could Jades kill a sage? Yeah, I kind of like the fact that, when Lindon finally asks that, Ethan is kind of like, yeah, isn't that weird that nobody's asked? That felt very much like him commenting himself through Ethan for a second there. And when I went back and re-listened to the first book with Owen, I definitely had a moment of just like, well, I guess that he didn't quite have an idea exactly how advanced he was going to make sages. And therefore, once we get further into the story, this doesn't quite hold up the same way, but that can happen. As an author, you can sort of have an idea, but you don't have it quite fully formed enough. So when you go forward, you begin to realize, ooh, I wasn't entirely prepared for this, actually. So that's kind of what I thought had happened, was simply yeah, it was meant to be that they overpowered somebody at higher level than them, but that at the time that you're reading the first book, you don't realize how kind of impossible that really should be. And then by the time you're later on in the books, you've sort of taken for granted that that happened and you're over it and it's fine. I 100% though love the fact that we are going back and dealing with this in this way. What a great idea. You know, like, if you're gonna retcon, and you're all saying that he said this was planned, and I believe him. I really do. But let's say it wasn't. If you're gonna retcon, do this. Go fucking hard. Like, if you're gonna retcon, I want you to, like, back up like this and show me the whole thing and be like, so, clearly you didn't have all the information, and the fact that you didn't understand what happened there is a you problem. I really like it. And like I said, I 1,000% didn't expect to like the Sword Sage. I don't know why, because again, Yaren has very good taste. Like, she's a smart girl. She can see through bullshit. He obviously, like, when he died, she was fucked up about it. She clearly went through a lot of grief and struggled. And, I don't know, there's just like a part of me that's sort of like, why didn't I buy the fact that this dude was clearly somebody, that I would probably want to chill with if she liked them, and she likes Lindon, and I like Lindon. So clearly, boom, done, you know? And it turns out he honestly has like a tiny bit more in common, I feel like, with Fury than he does with Northstrider. Because I was thinking he was more a Northstrider. He sounded so harsh. I'm realizing now that him doing bonker stuff and putting her in bonker situations wasn't him being a dick, although tiny bit maybe. It was more him just being like, oh, this will be nuts. Do you want to do something really fucking crazy? Let's do something crazy. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? Let's do this, but you're going to be blindfolded. Can you believe this? We're going to blindfold you. Okay. Shh. Do it. That's kind of more the vibe that I get from him in this section. Like, he's up here getting his power siphoned away by this weird scripted thing that's happening. And he's telling himself, yo, I never felt this weak before. Like this, it's been years and years and years since I felt, this is kind of good. Ooh, we should like come vacation and train here. That's what I should tell all the sages. This is really probably good for us to like be reminded of like how weak we had been. And there's a novelty to it that I feel like Fury would really identify with. Fury's bored, you know? He regrets ascending because he doesn't have anybody to fight anymore. And there's a bit of like a sense that that's sort of the Sword Sage's feel too. You know, he's the thing that he really has to motivate him that Fury doesn't have is Yaren. And this makes me wonder if Fury decided to take on an apprentice, a disciple, would that do something for him? I don't know if it would unless they had the same issue that Yaren has with the Blood Shadow, because that seems to be, in large part, the motivating factor in coming to Sacred Valley at all. And this is why the Winter Sage says that Yaren is solely responsible for his death. I am assuming that's why she thinks this. She may think it because she thinks Yaren should have protected him, but I don't think so. I think she knows that he went to Sacred Valley for her, because what he was intending was to find something to take care of her Blood Shadow problem. And I'm certain that she must like lay the blame for that at Yaren's door, which sucks a little bit. Like, it's not fair, but also, you know, it's the kind of thing like when it's somebody that you care about so much and it doesn't seem like the person they're doing this for necessarily appreciates it, which I don't think Yaren had any idea. Did she? That was why they were there? Did he confide that to her? I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't tell her, because that sort of gets her hopes up. And he strikes me as the kind of person that wouldn't really want her to know that there was potential to fix this problem out there unless he had it in hand already. Or unless there was a way to like make her work for it somehow, and he would like motivate her using that. But if it's just something that he goes and gets, I could see him not really wanting to like give her that info right out of the gate. Ben says, side note, since we didn't get his name for so long, there was a joke among the fandom referencing Monty Python, and he was named Tim. Will gave the fandom a nod by making his first name Timaeus. Oh my god, that's pretty good. The one you can call me Tim? She didn't know exactly why they were there, although she knew he was looking for something in the labyrinth. Okay. Yeah, so I feel real bad because, like, I can understand the Winter Sage feeling the way that she does, but also saying that, like, it's Yaren that's responsible for his death when Yaren didn't know that's why they were there, didn't ask to go, wasn't interested in, I won't say she wasn't interested in a cure, but she wasn't, like, demanding a cure from him. He just thought he had figured something out that he could do. That's rough to lay that at her feet. And I wonder if Yaren is aware how much the Winter Sage holds her responsible, because I don't think she really knows. And now that they're going to be, like, buddied up, if indeed Yaren accepts the Winter Sage as her mentor, that will have to come to a head eventually. And I can't help but wonder if that isn't what brings our whole crew back to Sacred Valley maybe a little earlier than they had planned. If it seems like, yeah, he died, but he was on the right track. The thing is there. He probably could have fixed this. That said, we did watch somebody literally consume their blood shadow. We watched Longhook. Hey, what's up? I didn't say Longclaw this time. Give me a gold star. We watched Longhook eat his fucking blood shadow. So does she need anything external, or does she just need to learn how to do that? I am dying to know what that's about and why Ethan hasn't, like, told her that that's possible yet. Because was Longhook Underlord? I think he was, right? He was Underlord level, or maybe, like, I can't remember. So, ostensibly, his ability to do that is within her grasp from where she stands now. Like, in terms of just the level that she's at now. We know that within Underlord there is a vast, like, gulf from top to bottom. And Ethan is, like, proof of that. So it may be something that, yeah, she's an underlady, and so technically, yeah, she could do this. But it will still take her years to get there. And, you know, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Ofer says, Longhook said it will cripple the blood shadow. I don't think it would have killed it. Did he? I thought that it was just basically setting him back a bunch, but I thought that the blood shadow, like, really protested against this because it knew that this was sort of the end of it. Blood shadow. Yes. Sorry. Ben's giving me some pieces of a comment here. I'll wait for you to finish, Ben. So anyway, all right, you know what? I'm gonna go to the book. I'm gonna go to the book. Information requested: Death of the Sage of the Endless Sword. Synchronization set at 80%. That's somewhat low. Interesting. Timaeus Adama had been a guest of the Heaven's Glory School for almost 3 months. Now, that right there, that was a shock. I had no idea that they were there for so long. I don't remember if Yaren mentioned how long they'd been there, but that really just, the idea he has been there this whole time just never even occurred to me. That's a long time. They were a collection of backward savages who had forgotten nearly everything about the sacred arts. It was astonishing, really, how ignorant they were. But they let him inside the labyrinth. And I love knowing that Yaren said something about how, like, if he knew what they were teaching everybody, he would have probably, like, killed everybody in Sacred Valley. Both because of what they were teaching and the fact that, like, they were treating Lindon the way that they were. I wonder if that's true, because he's got a good idea of what they believe from this encounter. You know, he's been there months. But I guess that because he's at the school and not down in the village, he doesn't exactly comprehend just, like, how bad it is, I think. And the curse that had drawn him there is not actually a curse, as it turns out. It is a script that is, like, drawn under the ground. I'm going to try and find the exact description of it. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. So he's going up against some entities as he's in this labyrinth, which, by the way, he is really, like, hiding a lot of stuff in his soul space and telling them that he's coming up empty-handed because the Heaven's Glory School had really expected him to split whatever it was that he took from these labyrinths with them as a thank you for letting him in. And he's kind of feeling such contempt for them that he doesn't want to give them any of these treasures because they're just not going to be able to make use of half the stuff as part of it. Like, they're all jades, you know? They can't even, like, they don't even understand him being a sage. They just keep calling him a gold because they truly don't get how much more beyond them he is. And part of the reason that they don't get it is likely that while he's here, it does not seem like he's that far ahead of them because of the script affecting his Madra. Bunch of comments. Okay. So, Ofer says the Blood Shadow was part of Longhook and is considered a part of his advancement in his cult. So, then he didn't consume it permanently. It was just, okay, so that isn't really an option for Yaren. Okay, so then she does need a cure of some kind. Or she could just keep consuming it. Which, I mean, just like, you know, it's pretty brutal, though, to do. But she sort of figured out a way to use it in a... It's so frightening the way that she's using it to her because it's able to do things she didn't expect. It's just not under her control entirely. So I'm not really super comfortable with that either. So yeah, this is when he picked up his step jogging down the hall. How long had it been since he felt the physical toll of simply running? Sages should vacation here. It might remind them what it was like to be mortal. So, sages are immortal? Or is it just that they're more than mortal? Is that, you know, it could go either way. So, he's like taunting the remnants that are following him. And when he gets to the door to open it, it just doesn't open. And he has this like moment of just like, wait, what? And finally he just says, sweat ran down his face. He pushed on the door with both hands, sharpening his mind to a point. This would be far too embarrassing a place to die. Oh, honey. I'm so sorry. That sucks. This is just really like, I hate knowing that right up until the moment that he died, he fully did not expect to die. That's really the through line for the prologue in his POV. It never even occurs to him that he will die. He is worried that Yaren will die. And so he is just hoping that when he gets out of there, Yaren will be with him. That's the thing. He is not considering that he won't get out. And reading from his POV, of course, he would feel this way. Why wouldn't he? And I gotta wonder what it is that they've been giving him, because it turns out when he finally gets out of this place and gets greeted by these people, they give him a drink, and he even thinks to himself, you know, if they knew more about the sacred arts, that he would have punished them for constantly trying to poison him. So again, he's been here for months. I have been thinking that the poisoning has been that was a one-time thing, that they like treated him normally and kind of got him to lower his guard, and eventually they decided to take initiative and poison him. But as it turns out, they are continuing to poison him, and he is simply not calling them out on the fact that they have been doing this. So really, this could be a couple of things. His body doesn't take care of the poison as well as he thought, because of the script that affects his body and the whole way that he operates. It could be that they figured out a poison that would wear him down specifically, and it just managed to get past his defenses. It could be that they've been giving him enough that it accumulates over time in his body, and he eventually, with enough of it, can't fight back anymore. Any of these things. I feel like it's just he is reveling in the fact that he's lower power right now and that everything is more of a challenge, but he's still behaving as if his body will be able to fight back against poison like it would normally do. And that's a really, like, dangerous fucking line to walk, sir. And I get that's part of his deal, right? That's really, like, this is a dude who is a tiny bit arrogant, probably more than tiny, who enjoys the risk and the novelty of being more vulnerable than he normally was. And yet, he is still underestimating the reality of that and how much of an effect it has. And it's hard to watch. I'm not going to lie, you guys. It is not my favorite. I feel like I just want to step into the book and grab him by the face and be like, sweetie, this is so much worse than you know. Oh my God, will you stop? Don't drink that shit and then grin at them. What? Just dump it and be like, what the fuck? Like, just don't do this. You're toying with them and you're killing yourself and you have no idea, you know? Oh, it's awful. It's awful. Andy says, I believe sages and heralds stop aging. Oh, all right then. That must be nice. Ben says, it's less what they gave him and more that he didn't realize his weakened spirit would also weaken his body to the point of sharp pointies being a threat again. Sharp pointies. That is going to be what I call knives forever. Yeah, I get the sense that this is just him not really quite grasping all of the ways in which he is being made vulnerable. And it's just, oh God, it's so frustrating. His pity for them matched his contempt. If not for that, and for the fact that he was too lazy to wash his own clothes and prepare his own meals, he would have punished them long ago for trying to poison him. And honestly, if that isn't the funniest fucking reasoning, and I feel like, dude, you literally let yourself die because you didn't want to do your own laundry. Sir, I know that you didn't know that's what you were doing, but when it comes down to it, that's what it was. Just get a fucking assistant that will do that shit. I know that you're not going to make Yaren do it, but shit. This is such like a fucking dude. This is just a fucking dude right here, man. This whole thing. Oh, man. So yeah, they give him a bottle. He drinks the shit. He knows that it's poisoned and he just drinks it and looks at him and is just like, welp, there it is. When he never said a word about the poisoning, they grew bolder. They knew he had treasures, and the longer he stayed with them, the better they understood that he wasn't going to share. If he brought up nothing from the labyrinth, they knew his sword was valuable, and they knew he was carrying herbs and seeds and elixirs they had never seen before. They wanted to rob him, but the joke was on them. Nothing they brewed here could seriously affect a body thrice reborn in soul fire. If the heavens shone on them and one of their concoctions worked, he carried no void key. As a sage skilled in spatial manipulation, he stored, skilled in spatial manipulation, he stored everything but his sword in a pocket accessible only by his authority. If they put him to sleep and rifled through his robes, they might take his sword, but they could never bring out its power. And realistically, they couldn't do him any harm, no matter how weakened he was. So, wrong. But what's really kind of coming to light here is, as much as I like this guy, as much as I find him amusing and a lot of his motivations hilarious, if there had been one less of each of them, he might have come out of this alive. It's a terrible, like, perfect storm of overestimating his own body and underestimating the effects of everything on him, being lazy and not wanting to do things for himself, underestimating potentially what they could brew. He doesn't, he's saying, well, they couldn't do anything. You don't know. You don't know what they got, though, do you? And just the fact that he could have shared here and there and kept this from happening. I think that for me is the one that's the worst to know, is that he felt they weren't really worthy of the stuff that he was stealing. And so he decided to keep it all for himself. And they began to catch on to the fact that he was not planning on sharing. And they decided that they were going to take matters into their own hands. Now, do they suck? Yes. But they also had made a deal, and he reneged on the deal. And lied repeatedly to their face with no compunction whatsoever. Maybe if you just hadn't done that, my dude. I'm sure because they have so little in Sacred Valley that you could have given them like a tiny nothing and they would still have been super impressed because they just don't know any better. You could probably have given them some stuff that you brought with you that's actually really common. Pretend you found it in the labyrinth and they would be delighted, But he doesn't, he just is really bold and in their face about the fact that he's going to keep shit and kind of daring them to do anything about it. And they decided to do something about it, guy. So there's a big part of me that's like, there's so many factors that he had some control over. And to watch him make like the combo of all of these mistakes, it's just like, oh God, maybe this didn't have to go the way that it went, So yeah, this, they've been slipping him poison almost since his first day here. So I will say they didn't wait to poison him until they realized he wasn't going to share. They've been poisoning him from the start. So they're trash. But also, he could have said something and been like, oh, hey, I know that's what you're doing. What the fuck? There's just a lot of things that he had some control over. And he could have made it out alive. And it's just awful. It's awful. I hate it. So, the two Jades flattered him for a while as they led him through the snow that surrounded the ancestor's tomb and back to the Heaven's Glory School. It was late at night, so the bright ring of light Madra condensed around their mountain shone like a pale sun, and their rainstone buildings gleamed as though wet. Once again, his pity grew to balance his irritation about the poison. They thought this pathetic collection of stone huts was a school of the sacred arts. How would they react if he showed them his memory of the Frozen Blade School? Which I'm like, I don't know. How would they react? What's that like? I want to know. People like this didn't deserve his contempt. He reminded himself of that for the 10,000th time. They were just ignorant, isolated. When he and Yaren left, the natives would live out their short lives in relative contentment. Their condition wasn't their fault. But it was hard to remain charitable when they kept trying to rob him. Which, honestly, that's fair. So, at this point, he realizes that he's getting pretty tired. And he goes to talk to Yaren. And this was when I started to be like, okay, he's so tired that he collapses on the bed. That's that poison. That's not him. He is tired. Granted, he's mentioned many times that he didn't expect to be this tired. But still. That's clearly what's going on here. And Mordecai says he could have murdered them all after the first attempt at poison and walked in and out of the labyrinth every day he wanted. Honestly, Mordecai, he should have. I got no love for those motherfuckers after the whole way they acted. He should have done that. Like, straight up, that's what should have happened. They all are terrible people. And while I think that maybe upholding his end of things might have, like, kept them from going as hard as they did, really, when it comes down to it, is likely he should have just slaughtered them and gone in. That's really it. That's it. Like, I hate those guys so much. They go in and fucking ruin Lindon's whole family. Like, I hate him. I hate him so much. So he goes to see Yaren. And this is also part of what made me really like him more than I expected, was the clear affection he has for her. It's so obvious that he really cares about her, admires her. Like, he obviously, there's a sense almost that he thinks that she could not only walk in his shoes eventually and take his place, but that she might be better than him at some point, you know? And him just, every moment that they are in danger, she is his priority. And granted, that's partially because he just doesn't believe that he himself can be hurt in a significant way. But nevertheless, it's just so sweet to see how much she meant to him and how much he appreciated how hard she worked, how well he knew her. You know, when he comes in, she's working against this like puppet construct thing to practice. And he's thinking about the fact that all of his, the interactions that he has had with the people from Heaven's Glory, they haven't even asked Yaren's name. They haven't addressed themselves toward her, and how strange he found that. And, I think that they had veiled her enough so that she just seemed like, let's see. He had allowed her to interact with the Valley natives only at his side and only while veiled as an iron. He was thinking of relaxing that restriction soon. So, yeah, this, like, he's trying to keep her safe and then begins to realize, like, oh, I don't even need to worry about doing that because they aren't talking to her. Over these last weeks, they hadn't asked so much as her name. It was bizarre. Over these last weeks, he had come to figure out that it came down to the strange, twisted view they had of honor. None of them wanted the Sword Sage to think they were interested in a lowly apprentice for any reason, because that would lower their standards in his eyes for some reason. He didn't understand it, but he wasn't here for cultural research. If the Jades thought Yaren was beneath them, so much the better. No one would discover their reason for being here, and Yaren would be that much safer. Not that any of these half-baked Jades could touch Yaren's shadow. See, this is the moment. This is the moment where he's just like, she hasn't got shit to worry about from these motherfuckers anyway. And I find it really interesting that they're veiling her as an iron when he is perceived as a gold to them. Now, granted, they just don't understand a sage, but also his power is diminished so much that perhaps he simply comes across as a gold here. And apparently that's not what happens to Jades and Irons. Like, in Sacred Valley, if they haven't lived anywhere else, wouldn't have advanced enough to have power, like, taken away again. It seems like they probably just struggle just to get to the levels that they're at. So the fact that these people have reached like Jade at all is actually low-key impressive because of how difficult it is there. So I am assuming that Yaren is not yet experiencing this draw on her power and ability herself. She doesn't mention it to Lindon. She didn't experience it, or else I think she would have said something about it. So it seems like this sort of really only affects you if you are beyond a certain level. And I'll tell you guys what, I know that it shouldn't matter to me. And like, okay, it doesn't. It does a little bit. I know that it shouldn't. But y'all know how I was just like, really getting off on the fucking thought of Lindon swooping in as a goddamned underlord and just being like, what's up, bitch? Bet you thought you'd seen the last of me. And knowing that if he goes back there, it won't even seem that he's an underlord, really, or he won't be able to do what he does. That he won't be able to do things at the capacity we've seen him do. He'll still be wildly powerful. They'll still be super impressed. So I really shouldn't be as like bummed about it as I am. They'll fall to their fucking faces when they see him after everything that he has managed. However, it does bum me out that going back there is still going to diminish him somehow. I find that very annoying. I don't like it. So he goes in and Yaren beats the fuck out of this puppet, and she turned to him beaming, but trying to hide it. Cleanest win so far, she said, staying casual, smoother than butter. Adama gave her some lazy applause. Cheers and celebration for you. He was proud of how far she'd come, but flowery praise wasn't his way. Still, Yaren drew herself up like he'd handed her a crown. And this whole interaction between the two of them, the fact that he isn't effusive with his praise, but she knows that he's not. And so what little praise he gives means that much more to her. They just know each other really well. It's really, I just enjoy seeing two people who have sort of learned enough about the other that their interactions mean something slightly different to them than it would to somebody who's looking in from the outside. You know what I mean? So here it is. The curse of Sacred Valley wasn't any kind of curse at all. It was perhaps the largest and most elaborate script formation ever created by mankind, spanning hundreds of miles and buried deep beneath the earth. That formation generated a suppression field that weakened everything that crossed its boundaries. At first, he had believed it was a security measure to keep monarchs out. Now he was growing certain that it was primarily intended to keep the labyrinth's lone inhabitant starving. The father of the dread gods, Subject 1. Nope, don't like that. Oh, no. What is under there? Is that what he sees walking around in that vision from Suriel? Does somebody break that script? Nobody can kill a dread god. Not even you, Abaddons. What are you good for? Y'all can bring people back to fucking life. Get down here and take care of these things. Jesus Christ. So, he was here to find a cure for Yaren, but not just a cure. He wanted a way to separate the blood shadow from her with no spiritual damage at all. That was a degree of magnitude more difficult than just removing it, but he couldn't risk any damage to his apprentice. So, he is growing more and more certain that he could do it. He needed a few more weeks. With the suppression field working on her parasite, they had plenty of time. The fact that he was like making progress and was starting to figure this out and now he's dead is so saddening. Like, is there any way to recover the experimentation that he was apparently attempting and figure out his notes? She's got his remnant. Is the information in there? In the remnant somehow? So, at this point, he tells her that he is going to, Ben says he doesn't seem like a note-taking kind of guy. Au contraire, Ben. He had filled his void space with enough ancient research notes and experimental materials that he was sure he was closing in on an answer. I mean, it may be that he's just collecting other people's notes, but nevertheless, they're there. The notes are extant, but he's dead and they were in like his void space. It was a void space, not a void key. Like, it's a void space that's like part of him. So I guess when he died, did that shit just vanish? That sucks. Ugh. So he goes and lays down, and he wakes up, and Mordecai says void space or soul space. It said void space a couple times, I'm pretty sure. But because I said soul space initially, but then when I was rereading it, I was like, oh, he doesn't say that. But I am not going to go back and find it right now. So he falls asleep, and despite the suppression of Sacred Valley, his Madra should have been shredded, should have shredded everything in the room. This is when he gets stabbed and he wakes up. And he can't believe that, first of all, anybody was able to stab him in the first place. Secondly, that when he lashes out at them, they don't die. One person dies, but not everybody. Thirdly, they all have half-silver blades, which is not common outside of Sacred Valley, which we remember Lindon trying to pay that one dude with bits of half-silver when they were going to go take a bath, and how that man almost fell over himself trying to make a deal and take as much as he could. Apparently in Sacred Valley, that's just fucking currency. Outside, it's not common. So this is something that he wasn't expecting. And it disrupts your Madra. Normally, they wouldn't have penetrated his skin. He hadn't considered the full implications of the strength being leached from his Archlord body. It had been too long since any mundane attack was a threat. It's so awful to read this, guys. I can't tell you, knowing where it's going. It's just the dread from it, you know? So he is determined to protect Yaren and shoves her away from him a couple of times, does all kinds of things to pull her out of the line of fire. And he is growing more and more disgusted at the fact that he's fighting fucking irons at this point. He can't believe that this is what he has descended to. He's so irritated, which is honestly, if you didn't know that he was going to die, it would be so much funnier. But because he is going to die, reading it makes you so sad in its way, even though it is still a little funny, you know? So it ends, because I have to jump ahead here. He tells her to go, and she's of course not listening, and he has to be like, of course she isn't listening. Adama took a club on the jaw and another on the back of his head. A line of Madra seared into his back, and his sight started to fade. With jades and irons piled on top of him, he turned from Yaren and took a step up the stairs of the ancestor's tomb. More attacks landed, and he took another step. Another. His entire being fixed on the door, and his existence narrowed down to a singular purpose. He was going to that door, and these people would not stop Yaren from advancing. She would succeed him. Those were the two most prominent thoughts his remnant inherited when it rose from his body. The door and Yaren. There's something so sweet about that, guys. It's honestly kind of touching. She was the thing on his mind when he died. It got to me a little bit, I'm not going to lie. So, then we start chapter 1. And Northstrider is such an asshole. Look, he winds up being somewhat reasonable. And he walks off with Dross, granted. But he says to Lindon, oh, I was definitely going to give him back. I just wanted to check him out. Which, okay, I appreciate that you weren't straight up stealing him for yourself. But also, you could have just said that. You could have told him, I'm going to give it back. I'm going to look at it, though, real quick. You could have, communicated with him at all. But Lindon is so below his notice. It's just not even a fucking issue. There's no reason for him to communicate with this kid. What do I care if he's upset? He'll get it back. No, he doesn't know he'll get it back. What do I care if he knows that? He will. I know that. Shut up. Who cares? It's awful because as you're reading it, you really have no idea. You know? We are in the same situation that Lindon is in, where we're just like, What is he fucking doing? He's leaving? He's just taking Dross and leaving? And I have to say that I was really appreciative of the fact that, you know, I said at the end of the last episode, Dross had been low-key excited about the idea of Athan taking him, because he was really interested in being with somebody who had more, maybe intelligence, he would probably say, although I would argue that, and just overall knowledge and abilities. And so there was a part of me that was really worried Dross was going to be like, oh, this is rad. I'm going off with Northstrider. Fuck yeah. Or at least that he would be like, Lindon, stop panicking. I'll be back. It'll be fine. I was just afraid that it would be that Dross was not particularly concerned here, and that Lindon would be the only one trying to hold on, making it more that Dross was like with Lindon due to convenience, but didn't really care too much, and that if he got a better offer, he would just take off, you know? I wouldn't have liked that. It would have made me feel like basically that Dross was a bit of a fair weather friend. That's what it would have felt like. And also, I wouldn't want it to be like Lindon is desperate to keep Dross because he's like dependent on him because we know like he is to a great degree, although he does a lot to try and keep that from being true. We saw when he was training with all of the dream tablets that Charity gave him, that he really tried to learn all of the techniques and stuff by sight without Dross's help, because he didn't want to be completely dependent on Dross. So I really respect that. But, you know, I was afraid that it was going to seem more like he was resentful of this resource being taken away. And instead, both of them have this total panic reaction. And I was really gratified to see that to Dross, being pulled away from Lindon like this is just as unthinkable. And he is extremely upset by it. Like when the portal opens again and Dross goes shooting straight back into Lindon's spirit, Northstrider's surprised by it because clearly he doesn't have this kind of relationship with his presence. And Dross, when he's talking to Lindon from inside of him, has a distinct nervousness to his tone, a real feeling of like he's trying to pretend, oh, I knew everything was going to be okay, but he didn't, not really. And I was extremely happy to see that he was so relieved to be back and determined to not let that happen again. Because really what happens here, Northstrider says, who's Dross? Lindon tries to be like, I don't know what you're talking about, to which Northstrider is like, go fuck yourself. Says, manifest yourself. And Lindon tells Dross, don't. And Dross does it. And I thought, is this the first step of Dross kind of just being like, bye, Lindon, it's been fun? And it's hard to know whether or not Northstrider forced Dross to manifest, because he has the ability to sort of like call things into existence. But I don't think so. I think it was Dross's choice, because he was extremely eager to meet Northstrider, as we saw. I don't think he expected Northstrider to just grip him up and fucking walk away. So he says, it's an honor to meet you, Master. I am called Dross. And you're the mind spirit born from Ghostwater in its last days, Northstrider said. Lindon pushed back to his feet. He needed to remind the Monarch he was there, which indeed does seem to be the case, as we see later. Like, the Monarch was not intending to involve Lindon in this whole little exercise of exploring who Dross is, until it's clear that the two of them are a package deal. And then he's pretty much like, yeah, all right, fine. You know, like, just if it's going to shut this guy up, then sure, come along with us, whatever. So Northstrider manifests his little dealie and asks Dross, do you recognize this? And Dross is like, oh shit, is that the tree? At first he thinks it's just temperature construct. And then he says, it's the Oracle tree, but it's so small now. Northstrider says this is the last version of that project, which I call the Oracle Codex. It is more than capable of teaching you the next step in your advancement. Read it for yourself if you can. That set off every alarm in Lindon's mind. Northstrider was Lindon's benefactor. He was a great enemy of the old dragons, and he was capable of upgrading Dross. Lindon would have traded his remaining arm for that kind of support. But this was no act of charity. Northstrider was testing Dross in some way, and Lindon didn't know what passing looked like, or what the penalty for failure was. So he tries to step in and be like, oh no, we're certainly not worthy of that. And Dross is just like, yeah, we are, and just fucking goes for it, which you can see why I was a little agitated. And Dross is in there, inside this construct apparently, and is saying that this is tougher than it looks. There's like colors coming out of it and rippling around. And then Dross pushes back through. The spirit took a deep breath. Oh, it's amazing. So much space. And it's so organized in here, like a library run by clocks. Here's an interesting memory. Not about me. And this one, also not about me. Dross's arm was finally ejected, and he flew back to Lindon's shoulder as though kicked. Sorry, so sorry. Just give me one more try. This time, there was the smallest hint of satisfaction on Northstrider's face. No, you passed. You're coming with me. Dross brightened. Ha ha! You see, I knew I had passed. I just wanted to pass harder. Did you hear that, Lindon? He appreciates me. And again, this was why I was just really not sure. So, Northstrider scoops Dross up and turns and opens a portal and begins to walk away. And Lindon can feel this like thread of connection between him and Dross being stretched to the breaking point. Lindon dashed for the portal, but Northstrider glanced at him. Invisible force pushed Lindon back, and the portal winked shut, cutting off Dross's horrified shout. So really, when I heard that he had a horrified shout, that was all I needed. And I was like, oh, thank God, because it really just seemed like Dross was not going to be fucking worried. But once we got that, I was like, okay. It seems like this is not what he wanted either. The connection between them thinned further, fraying more with every passing second. He wasn't going to be able to hold on. The thread melted in his grip. When it broke, Dross would be gone. Would he ever come back? And we also, Lindon thinks to himself, too, about how he doesn't actually know what the effect of them being separated will have on his spirit. And so this could potentially actually injure him. And I would like to think that Northstrider wasn't going to do this if it would injure him. That him being like, well, I was going to bring him back, that means that it would have been fine. But I'm not entirely certain that Northstrider gives a fuck about anybody else's spirit. I'm not convinced of the fact that he would ever care. So, I'm trying to find the spot. Dross's voice flickered in and out of his thoughts in incomprehensible jumble. Then the force pulling against him redoubled. The connection almost snapped, but just as he was about to lose it, he saw it. In his mind's eye, he could see the link between himself and Dross as a silver thread stretching into the distance. It was the same way he visualized his Madra, and it felt equally real. Now that he could see the connection, he focused on it even more intently. He squeezed his eyes shut so the thread became all he could see. He leveraged all the power of his spirit, his Madra surging. Excess pure Madra gushed out of him, filling the hallway. Lighting scripts brightened to unusual levels, constructs in the wall overloading or activating in a squeal of sounds. His spirit strained. He might suffer permanent spiritual injury from this, or from having Dross torn away from him. In the worst case scenario, this might be the end of his life as a sacred artist. He might lose. But it wouldn't be because he gave up. So, just as he resolved to die before he let go, Dross's presence filled his mind again. The hair-thin connection between them flexed to a thick, braided cord. His eyes snapped open to see that the portal had opened again. He now stood panting and weak and red-faced in front of Northstrider. And Dross gave a glad cry and floated over to Lindon, merging once again with his spirit. Lindon could feel his fear. While trying to keep Dross, he had intentionally ignored the reality of his situation. He had just openly defied a monarch. He glanced up to Northstrider's eyes, terrified to see anger there. Instead, he saw a surprise, perhaps consideration. "Come, boy," Northstrider said, and Lindon gladly followed. "Yeah, all right, gladly. Look, I get it, gladly in comparison to whatever, but Jesus, dude does this to me. I want to get the fuck away from him ASAP, my friend." So he goes into the throne room that he had seen the coronation happening in with Suriel. And there's a ton of monarchs here and some heralds and sages. But basically, Lindon is like lowest level of anybody in the room, it seems like. Emrys Silentborn is here, and she is like in her sort of humanish form. And honestly, I am super intrigued by her and want to know more about her. I want to know more about her, and I want to know more about Cassius's wife. I keep talking about his wife, and I stand by it. She sounds so fucking badass, and I'm just still low-key mad that we haven't like gotten a little bit more of her. But you can't do everything. I understand. I would like a little bit of a side story about her. How about that? That'd be fine. So everybody is talking here. And they are all feeling a way about how everything has gone down. And they seem to be under the impression that heaven's no longer watching, which we find out is untrue. Machiel's hound had left in order to let them get back to figuring their own shit out. But apparently he's still like seeing shit. He's still hearing them trying to make plans to basically ignore the Abaddon and do whatever the fuck they felt like in the first place. They need to be reminded very quickly again that this is not something to be like, that they can't be ignored this way. And it's interesting because Northstrider eventually says about the Abaddon that they play with us like we're toys just for their own like reasons and agendas. And they don't care at all about us. And that's a really serious allegation in its way. And I want to know why he feels this way and why they all apparently seem to feel this way, because none of them appear to be interested in ascending and becoming Abaddon. And Lindon realizes as they're talking that there has been this sort of like impression made with the speech that was given in front of all of the contestants that these underlords were going to be lifted on high. And that was going to be part of their potential prize if they like get further on in the tournament, that they would be selected by the Abaddon. And he starts to realize that's not really it at all. The Abaddon want to pick from among the monarchs, actually. And Reagan is also kind of accusing Northstrider of some shit. He says, I am more interested in the fortuitous timing of heaven's intervention. It so happens that 16 competitors remained, allowing Northstrider to select a single elimination round. Then an Abaddon messenger descends upon us when one and only one competitor has been eliminated. The very young man that Northstrider has chosen to bring along to this meeting. I humbly admit I do not understand the plan at work here, but to blame coincidence is to strain credulity. Did you calculate all this when you stepped in as Judge Northstrider? Have you deceived us all? And Dross has to tell Lindon, because all of these like awarenesses sort of descend upon him, that Northstrider is likely shielding him from the pressure of the awarenesses, because one monarch is tough enough. All of them at once, just forget it. And Northstrider basically is like, y'all agreed to let me do this. You agreed that you were cool with how it was going down. You can't take that shit back now. And it's an interesting question, because So I'll tell you guys what, first of all, I didn't really think that Lindon was out of the running at the end of the last book. Apparently he is. Apparently the fact that the hound of one of the hounds, what's his name again? I can't remember the one that gets sent down. He comes down and says nobody can be eliminated. And Lindon had been eliminated like 3 minutes prior. So evidently that still counts. I kind of thought that he was saying, including whoever was eliminated today, but they don't see it that way. And apparently that's not how he meant it. So I kind of thought that Lindon was going to have to participate, because this was going to, there would be no more people being cut from the running. But apparently Lindon is the only one that isn't locked into completing this now. And that gives him like a particular amount of freedom, but also restricts our other friends who are still involved in the competition to such a degree that I'm really afraid for them in a way. So let's see. We don't doubt ourselves, Northstrider, Reagan Shen said. We doubt you. And Northstrider says, do any of you believe I would violate my oath even if a son of mine was competing? Do you believe that your panel of judges would have been less susceptible to influence than I am? Do you believe that I have outwitted the rest of you and manipulated matters to my own advantage beneath your very eyes? Allow me to set your doubts at ease. And this kind of back and forth continues with Reagan Shen making a bunch of comments about trying to get in on Malice's territory, and the Dragon Monarch looking at her and smiling sort of conspiratorially. And she says, whatever weapons you have, if you take one step onto my land, you will be forced to use them. And Lindon gets very agitated because they're all talking in a way that seems like they don't think of the fact that there are people going to die. Lindon is aware the Black Flame Empire includes Sacred Valley, and there's a whole bunch of people that would be at their mercy who are very weak if things were to go wrong. And they just don't really seem connected to that concept, which I can understand why not. So Ben says when they teleported at the end of Uncrowned, the other 15 were placed by Curian in their arena while Lindon was on the side. Oh, okay, Ben. I didn't realize that he transported them. I thought that all of the ones who had gotten through had been in the arena already, and that Lindon gets transported to the sidelines by Curian, while everybody else had already been there. I didn't realize that he had transported everybody. Gotcha. That makes sense. So, yeah, as I said, this guy swoops down and is so kind of irritated at the fact that they all seemed to be, this moment. Do you think the eyes of heaven are blind? Any outcome you see, we saw long ago. Do not worry over the future, for that is my province. Let me remind you once again to play your game fairly. Any coercion or intimidation or violence or bending of the rules to influence the tournament will be resolved immediately by me. We no longer need to waste time on your festivities. Events have outpaced you. The next fight of the 4th round will take place tomorrow, with 1 fight per day until the 4th round is concluded. That is all the time I will allow you. To which I say, thank God, because a week between just seemed insane to me once we got down to this point. We did not need to be doing this. A week of festivities between every single round? And the rounds last, maybe half an hour? I'm not here for that. So Malice says that is ludicrous. This will ruin everything. The news will have no time to spread. If I had known the timeline would be altered, this is Northstrider, I would have changed the structure of the entire round. Am I the arbiter of this tournament, or are you? And Kieran finally just says, "You're the ones who have no time for a lengthy tournament. If you still wish for time between rounds to train your students, then the length of the rounds themselves must be condensed, unless you would prefer your competition to be interrupted by a dread god. You've got 3 months. 3 months. 3 months. What? That is not enough time. That's too soon. That's too soon. 3 months. He was supposed to get 30 years. Fuck. And I know, like, I don't have time. I'm over time. But I know that the whole thing with fate got, like, pushed forward by Machiel during that conversation with Suriel, where he's just like, all right, I'm going to accelerate some shit. But I just didn't think it would happen that quick. And, yeah, I don't know. The rainbow-shrouded monarch of the Nine-Cloud Court stepped forward and bowed at the waist. And invites Curian to stay, to further explain and speak with them. And he says, I will make an exception and explain myself to you. For the rest of you, you have work to do. So Northstrider opens a portal again and steps outside with Lindon. And they're on the roof. And Lindon straight up tells him, I'm really fucking scared. I don't know what the other monarchs are going to do to the people who are still in the competition. And Northstrider is like, good, you should be kind of scared. Because a lot of people would just be like, the Abaddon are watching over it all and we'll be fine. But I'm glad that you're not doing that. They act for their own benefit. But the competitors are under my protection. At least for the duration of the tournament, they will be safe. And he says, I will leave Dross within you, but I will study him again. I would have returned him before either of you were permanently harmed, but I will allow you to stay together from now on. Clearly you have formed a symbiosis. Until I call for you, do not neglect your training. Sophoranatoth is one of the 2 most favored to win this competition, and she will use penance on Akura Malice or myself without hesitation. If you wish to influence the situation, you must be stronger. Training will never let you down. He says one of the 2 most favored to win. Who's the second one? Is it Yaren? Is it Mercy? Is it Ethan? Who is it? I want to know. So, at this point, Lindon says, can we win? He just straight up asks. And Northstrider says the most certain path to victory is to have a fighter representing myself or Malice win the tournament. If we cannot accomplish that, victory becomes more costly or difficult, but not impossible. The only true defeat is death. I'll see you soon, Dross. And Lindon. I love that Lindon comes second. So, this leaves Lindon wondering, why had the monarch changed his mind about Lindon? He'd gone from treating Lindon like a patch of mud to answering his questions and addressing him directly. Was he so impressed by Lindon's determination? He didn't care about me at all. Then he came back for me. Was it something you said? Dross straightened himself up proudly. That's what it was. He does value my opinion, you know. And I'm like, I feel like it's the connection between the 2 of them. That silver connection. Was that like something related to the way that he accessed somehow? It feels like it wasn't until he saw the effect of pulling them apart from one another that he started to realize something was more significant here than he thought. And that's interesting. So I'm over time as usual, and I'm going to have to wrap up. But I appreciate you guys very much in the chat, hanging out with me, chit-chatting with me. I'm sorry I can't get to all of your comments because I'm over time as usual. I only covered 38 pages. Still 10 minutes over. I can't win. I'm not good at this. All right, guys. Thank you again. And thank you so much to Andy for commissioning this. And I will be seeing you again on Friday with a new episode. Until then, Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.